Hi everybody, Bobby Ogilvy, Project Manager and Professional Coach. Today's question: how can I best help my organization engage my organization with their engagement problem? And that could be both on an individual level and on a full organizational level. How do I boost my organizational engagement? So we're going to go through two models, the Perma Model and the SCARF model. And I may have mentioned Perma Model in some of my other videos, so I'm going to try to go through it faster, put a little more effort into SCARF model. I'm not sure if we've talked about that yet. All right, so Perma Model comes from Martin Seligman's work in positive psychology. And what it stands for is positive emotion, positive experiences, engagement, which is a lot around your kind of day-to-day, what you're doing, and you could think of it as even kind of operations, workplace productivity would be in the engagement piece. R is for healthy relationships. M is for meaning making, and then the last one, A, is for achievement. So what Seligman is trying to get across here is that there's a lot of factors that come together that affect someone's satisfaction. Happiness is kind of a misnomer here. So in fact, his current work uses the term authentic happiness because happiness is often kind of falsely associated as if it was like joy, and that like that is what truly being your best or truly being satisfied is. That's not it, and so that's why you need to throw in authentic happiness or satisfaction, which is a deeper sense of this, or probably even better is that these are factors that lead to boosting your resiliency, and in that way it's like you're buffered against stress, you're buffered against the dissatisfaction that arises through normal causes and conditions throughout life, right? And by also too having a system of these 5 factors, you can be stronger in one area or another, but you're kind of made to realize a lot of things come together in this to contribute to your satisfaction, and you can't just be strong in one area and have gaps in the rest of it. That's not going to work. That's not good. That's not good resilience. That's not good wellness and balance. What else can we say about this? So I think actually there's some updates to this model, and I'm not sure if it's just informally in terms of how they frame these 5 pieces, or if they actually tacked on a 6th piece, which has to do with kind of fitness and health wellness, and basically how important we know that is. I think within the 5 factors, you might want to pigeonhole that into the E part of engagement, because that's the one that's closest to like daily living. But I think I've heard other models where they tack on, maybe it's an S or something like that. But anyway, it's something else to tackle some of those other needs. I think a lot of the spiritual needs are handled by the 4th one, M, for meaning making, or the healthy relationship. So if you think of one reason a lot of people, even if their religious beliefs are maybe a little bit dogmatic, one reason it actually is still a protective factor for them in terms of their health and wellness is that they have such a strong community around them. They have such a strong support network. So a bunch of people, supportive people around them, and that would be the healthy relationships, right? Anyway, these are all factors that come together. So these are all very much at an individual level. So if you're thinking about individuals in your organization, this is how you want to be thinking about this. How much are these needs being met? How much are you creating a workplace which values and promotes all of these and wants well-rounded people? So then on an organizational level, and this is something that probably you as the manager or business leader in your organization would be handling more, is the SCARF model. And this comes out of David Rock's work. So what does SCARF stand for? Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So let's just recap what these are. Status is about respect. It could have to do with promotion and compensation, but really it's more about that you're getting good regard. You're not disrespected. You're not treated low status or dismissed. Right? That's something that's useful. When we're saying organizational wellness here, you could think of it as that these are things that if any of these 5 areas are mismanaged, they cause stress, and in doing that, they cause all these health outcome issues, but also it lowers their quality of people's work. And part of that, the neurological mechanisms in play have to do with, the more someone is stressed, mentally it's kind of like it's eating up mind space. They're not at their best. They're not at their full concentrative or focused ability. It's harder for them to summon kind of willpower and engagement. That would be a great thing, and neurologically it's like more hindbrain, midbrain kind of activation, less of their frontal, cortex prefrontals is going on. So you're just getting basically less deep critical thinking out of them. Anyway, continuing on. So status. Next, we have certainty. Certainty is really that your workplace is perceived as stable enough, I would say particularly clear enough an expectation that they know what's going on. If people don't know where or how to put in effort, they're not going to be very certain. I think this also kind of relates to the notion of self-efficacy, that someone sees the impact and link between their actions and choices and the outcomes or results. They know where they can put an effort. They know where they can make a difference. If things are uncertain, the situation or what's expected of them, that's very bad for them. That's stress-inducing, right? They don't know where and how to act. Particularly if you think of certainty about situations, this also has to do with kind of how the organization is doing or thriving, and just the stability of am I going to get a paycheck, right? So we know that startups are high risk. So if you're trying to allay fears around reliable pay, reliable compensation, it's not just enough to say, oh yeah, no, it'll be fine. You actually have to create a system of certainty, right? That's one of the reasons that sales is a very professional sales can be a very high stress job, because it is feast or famine. It can, many of them are full commission based, right? So there's not a lot of certainty there. So you need to develop all these emotional and engagement skills, keep putting in effort, or else, you don't have any certainty to fall back on. You don't have any stability to fall back on. Anyway, so creating a situation, an organization of certainty helps build trust, reduces stress. Next is autonomy. So autonomy is really just about personal freedom and choice, how much influence and choice they have over their work. You could also think of it as, freedom to not be micromanaged, not to be over-controlled, over-organized. I'm sure we've all come into contact with organizations that seem very rigid and process-oriented or bureaucratic, or even worse, very authoritarian, very, there's a very miserly kind of manager in charge of something. That's not helping anyone. The more someone can, choose the areas they want to work on, and particularly choose how to manage their own work, the better. That's a great engagement tool. So a lot of even the practices, for example, that holacracy organizations will use, holacratic organizations will use, so they have systems for tracking their projects and next actions, and people are managing their own workflow, particularly depending on the roles and accountabilities, and that is, much more self-directed than someone who says, yes, we're hiring you to be the bookkeeping analyst, and that's all you're doing, and you can't do anything else, and we're going to tell you how to do it, and we're going to check in on you twice a day how you're doing it. Yeah, that's not very autonomous. Fourth, relatedness. Relatedness has to do with healthy culture and cohesion, all the people stuff about how people are getting along. Are there healthy bonds between people? This is probably also the one that we could most strongly link to the culture, the emotional sentiments, and the way of how people in your organization are relating to each other. How healthy is that? This is a bit different than status, in that status is kind of the individual need for respect, whereas relatedness is group level stuff. What is the kind of emotional climate we're creating? In the classic, let's say Tuckman model, forming, storming, norming, performing, you could think of this as kind of that norming level when you're dealing with those group cohesion issues. You don't have to technically tell them what or how to do, but you do need to manage that people are in good spirits and engaged, and moderate and reduce any problems that do come up between people. On the bad end of things, if any of you have been in a toxic work environment, this would be in some sense a relatedness problem. You're going to have to deal with Sally, and Sally's so hard to deal with, and oh my God, it's so difficult, but we got to handle it, and it's draining, right? It's very crazy making dealing with things like that. The last one is fairness, and that might seem a little bit maybe tangential. I understand, how does fairness relate to wellness? Very important actually, and perhaps actually is some of the most longer term, like bigger scope, things you can organizationally do around wellness, because we're talking not just about fairness of outcomes, but fairness of process. Let me just quickly divide those up. One, people want to see that the right decisions are being arrived at. The people who do well, who do good things, being compensated properly. The people who do bad things or perform poorly are being handled appropriately. And even, perhaps even more importantly, long term, is that the way they approach those decisions is fair. So what do I mean by that? So one gap, particularly, let's say startups can get into, is that they don't have very good processes, but they hopefully have a few good managers, right? And that leads to it's like heroic leadership. You've made bets on a few people managing the situation. Now you don't have good processes, but you've made bet on these 2, 3, 4, X number of people, or maybe just one person who controls everything, and hopefully they keep making good decisions. Which is, one, it's a capacity bottleneck, but two, it also kind of, you can see how politicking might naturally emerge in that situation. It can also have a tone, if you think of versus being very process oriented. They're making the decisions depending on how much energy they have and what they're able to capacity-wise produce, as opposed to a more systematic way of approaching those outcomes. If you study this at a graduate level, this is actually a topic area called procedural justice. And people want to see that. When people don't feel there's fairness in play, when they feel basically procedural injustice, huge disengagement, right? I'm sure some of you may have experiences with that firsthand, but once you realize that the manager isn't making good decisions, or the way they're approaching some process, the way the organization is approaching some process is inefficient, and it's going to keep staying inefficient, or whatever the dysfunction is, it's horrible for engagement. No one wants to stay there. Anyway, so we've talked about a lot so far in this video. So just to recap, we have the Perma model: positive emotion, engagement, healthy relationships, meaning making, and achievement. That's Martin Seligman. We also then have the SCARF model, and that's, as opposed to Perma's more individual, SCARF is more organizational. SCARF is David Rock's thing, and that is status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So between the individual factors, between the organizational factors, hopefully you guys can work with these, come up with some good solutions to boost engagement in your organization. I'm Bobby Ogilvy, project manager and professional coach. Talk to you soon.